The rain turned the bus stop into a cage of shadows, and inside it sat a little girl who shouldn't exist. Not here, not now, not alone. When he asked if she needed help, her answer stopped his heart. I'm not allowed to go home. But it was the bruise on her wrist, shaped like adult fingers, that made him realize some children don't run away from home. They run away to survive. The rain came down in sheets that Tuesday night, the kind that turned streetlights into blurred halos and made the world feel smaller, lonelier. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, squinting through the rhythmic assault of his windshield wipers as they fought a losing battle against the downpour. The grocery bags in the passenger seat had toppled over somewhere between the store and the last red light, and he could hear the apples rolling around in the back, but he didn't care. He was tired, bone-tired. The kind that came from working a double shift at the warehouse, picking up his son from after-school care, making dinner, checking homework, and collapsing into bed only to do it all again the next day. Single fatherhood wasn't what he'd signed up for, but then again, life rarely asked for signatures. The bus stop appeared through the rain like a forgotten monument, a skeletal shelter with a flickering overhead light that seemed to be gasping its last breaths. He almost drove past it, almost, but something made him glance to the right, and that's when he saw her. A little girl, alone. She sat hunched on the metal bench, knees pulled to her chest, arms wrapped around a backpack that looked like it had survived a war. Her clothes were soaked through, her hair plastered to her pale face, and she was so small, maybe 7, maybe 8, too small to be out here at 9:30 at night with no adult in sight. His foot hit the brake instinctively. The car slowed, pulling to the curb just past the bus stop. He sat there for a moment, engine idling, wipers still going, his mind running through possibilities. Maybe she was waiting for someone. Maybe a parent was running late. Maybe it wasn't his business. But the rain kept falling and she didn't move, and something in his chest, the same thing that made him check on his son 3 times a night, wouldn't let him drive away. He killed the engine, grabbed his jacket from the back seat, and stepped out into the rain. The cold hit him immediately, soaking through his shirt as he jogged toward the bus stop. She didn't look up, didn't acknowledge him even as his footsteps splashed closer. Up close she looked even smaller, even more wrong. Her sneakers were falling apart, held together with what looked like duct tape. Her jeans were too short, exposing bony ankles. The backpack she clutched had a torn shoulder strap, and through the opening he could see a stuffed rabbit with one missing ear. "Hey," he said softly, stopping a few feet away, not wanting to scare her. "You okay?" She didn't answer, didn't even flinch, just stared at the wet pavement like it held secrets only she could read. He crouched down, bringing himself to her eye level, his jacket draped over one arm. The rain drummed against the metal roof of the shelter, filling the silence between them. "It's pretty late to be out here by yourself," he tried again, keeping his voice gentle. "Are you waiting for someone?" Finally, she looked at him. Her eyes were dark, enormous in her small face, and filled with something that made his stomach drop. Not fear exactly, but exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion no child should carry. "I'm not allowed to go home," she whispered. The words hung in the rain-soaked air between them, wrong in every possible way. "What do you mean you're not allowed?" "Mom told me not to," she said. "She said to wait here, not to come back until she comes to get me." He felt his throat tighten. "When did she tell you that?" The little girl's fingers tightened around the backpack. 2 days ago. 2 days. Jesus Christ. 2 days alone at a bus stop. He looked at her more carefully now, really looked, and saw what he had missed in the dim light. The dark circles under her eyes, the way her lips were cracked and dry, the trembling in her small frame that had nothing to do with the cold. And then he saw the bruise on her wrist, purple-blue, finger-shaped, wrapping around her thin arm like a terrible bracelet. "Who did that to you?" The question came out harder than he intended. She pulled her arm closer to her body, tucking it under the backpack. "Nobody." "Sweetheart, I'm not supposed to tell," her voice cracked. "I'm not supposed to tell anyone anything," Mom said. He wanted to push, wanted to demand answers, but he could see the fear radiating off her like heat. Whatever had happened, whoever had hurt her, the threat was still alive in her mind. He took a slow breath, softening his voice again. Okay. You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to, but you can't stay here. It's not safe. Have you eaten?" She shook her head, a tiny movement. "When was the last time you had food?" She shrugged, small shoulders barely moving. "Yesterday, a lady gave me part of her sandwich." His heart cracked a little more. He thought of his own son safe at home with the neighbor who watched him on late nights, probably already asleep in his warm bed with his favorite nightlight glowing. This little girl should have the same. Every child should. "Listen," he said, "I'm not going to make you do anything you don't want to do, but I have a car right there and I have food, real food, and I can take you somewhere warm and dry where you'll be safe. Just for now, just until we figure out what to do. Does that sound okay?" She studied him with those enormous eyes, and he could see her weighing it, the unknown of going with a stranger against the known horror of whatever she was running from. You won't call anyone?" she asked. "Not until you're ready," he lied, because he absolutely was going to call someone, but first he needed to get her somewhere safe. "I promise you'll be okay." The silence stretched. The rain fell. And then finally, she nodded. He stood, offering his jacket. She took it, drowning in the fabric as she wrapped around herself. When she stood, he could see how unsteady she was, how her legs shook. "Can you walk?" he asked. Another nod. They moved toward his car, her small form shuffling beside him, and as he opened the passenger door and helped her inside, pushing the grocery bags to the floor, he caught sight of something that made his blood run cold.
Through the torn opening of her backpack, beneath the one-eared rabbit, he could see it. A child's drawing, crude but clear, a stick-figure woman, a stick-figure girl, and standing in the doorway of their stick-figure house, a dark, scribbled figure with no face. She saw him looking and quickly zipped the backpack shut, clutching it to her chest like a shield. He closed her door gently and walked around to the driver's side, his mind racing. No face. The man in her drawing had no face because she was too terrified to give him one, or maybe because he was no one, a stranger who'd invaded her home, her life, her safety. As he started the engine and pulled away from the bus stop, he glanced at her in the passenger seat. She was staring straight ahead, barely blinking, the jacket still wrapped around her like armor. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. For a long moment she didn't answer. Then, so softly he almost missed it. "Lily." "Lily," he repeated. "I'm going to help you, I promise." She didn't respond, but he saw her fingers loosen just slightly on the backpack. The rain continued to fall as they drove through the empty streets, and somewhere in the back of his mind, a question took root and refused to let go. Where was her mother? And who was the man with no face? If you found a child alone like this, what would you do? Would you stop, or would fear of getting involved make you drive past? Drop your thoughts below, because sometimes the hardest choice is also the right one. The apartment was quiet when they arrived, just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of rain still pattering against the windows. He unlocked the door carefully, listening for any sound from his son's room. Silence. Good. The neighbor must have gotten him to bed on time. Lily stood in the doorway, dripping onto the welcome mat, her eyes scanning the small living room like she was mapping escape routes. I didn't blame her. Trust was a luxury she probably couldn't afford. "Bathroom's right there," he said, pointing down the hall. "There are clean towels in the cabinet. Why don't you get dried off while I make you something to eat?" She didn't move immediately, just stood there clutching that backpack, water pooling at her feet. "Lily," he said gently, "you're safe here. I promise." Something in his voice must have reached her because she finally nodded and shuffled toward the bathroom. The door clicked shut, and he heard the lock turn. Smart girl. He moved to the kitchen, his hands working on autopilot as his mind raced. He needed to call someone. Child services, the police, somebody. But the promise he'd made echoed in his head. Not until you're ready. If he called now and they came for her, she'd never trust anyone again. And something told me she needed to tell her story on her own terms, when she felt safe enough to let it out. He made grilled cheese sandwiches, the comfort food his son always requested when the world felt too big. He heated up some tomato soup, poured a glass of milk, and arranged it all on the table just as the bathroom door opened. Lily emerged, wrapped in a towel that was far too big for her, her hair still damp but no longer plastered to her face. She'd washed away some of the grime, and now he could see more clearly, the hollow of her cheeks, the way her collarbones jutted out, the bruises he hadn't noticed before, one on her shoulder, another on her shin. "I found some of my son's old clothes," he said, holding up a t-shirt and sweatpants. "They might be big, but they're dry." She took them without a word and disappeared back into the bathroom. When she emerged again, she looked impossibly smaller, swimming in fabric, but at least she wasn't shivering anymore. "Come eat," he said. She approached the table like it might be a trap, but when she saw the food, something cracked in her carefully maintained composure. Her hand reached out, trembling, and grabbed the sandwich. She ate like she was afraid someone might take it away, fast, desperate, barely chewing. He said nothing, just poured her more milk when she drained the first glass, pushed the second sandwich toward her when she finished the first. She ate that one too, then the soup, scraping the bowl clean with the spoon. When she finally stopped, her eyes were wet. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're welcome." He sat down across from her, keeping his movements slow, non-threatening. "Lily, I need you to help me understand what's going on. You said your mom told you not to come home. Where is she now?" Lily's fingers tightened around the empty glass. "I don't know." "When did you last see her?" 2 days ago. In the morning, she was crying. She told me to take my backpack and go to the bus stop and wait for her there. She said she'd come get me when it was safe." "Safe from what?" Lily's eyes darted to the window like she expected someone to be standing there, watching. "The man." His pulse quickened. "What man?" "I don't know his name. He started coming to our house about a week ago, at night mostly.
Mom would make me go to my room and close the door, but I could hear them. Hear him. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. He was angry. He yelled a lot. And Mom would cry and say she didn't have it, whatever it was. Did he hurt her? She nodded, a tiny movement that spoke volumes. I heard things breaking, and once I came out because Mom screamed, and his hand was around her throat. He saw me and smiled. She shuddered. It wasn't a nice smile. Jesus Christ. His hands clenched into fists under the table. Did he hurt you? She pulled her knees up to her chest, making herself small again. He grabbed me once, told me to stay out of the way. That's where this came from. She showed him her wrist, the finger-shaped bruises he'd seen at the bus stop. And 2 days ago, your mom told you to leave? She woke me up really early, before the sun came up. She was packing my backpack, put in Mr. Hoppy and some crackers and my extra shirt. She was crying so hard she could barely talk. She said the man was coming back and I needed to go, needed to hide, needed to wait at the bus stop until she came for me. But she never came. I waited, and she never came. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. A mother desperate enough to send her child away alone. A dangerous man making threats. 2 days of silence. Lily, do you remember this man's name or what he looked like?
She shook her head. Mom never said his name, just called him him. And he was big, really big. He had a tattoo on his neck like a snake or something. And his voice was, she struggled for the word, mean. His voice was mean. Do you know where your mom might be now? No. The word came out as a sob. I went back to our apartment yesterday, really quiet, to see if she was there. But the door was open, and everything inside was broken. The couch was turned over, and there was glass everywhere, and she stopped, her breath hitching. There was blood. On the floor. Not a lot, but some. His heart sank. This wasn't just a custody dispute or a messy situation. This was dangerous, potentially deadly. Lily, did you see anyone at the apartment? Anyone who might know where your mom is? No. I got scared and ran. I went back to the bus stop because that's where Mom said to wait, and I thought maybe she just got delayed. Maybe she'd still come, but the tears spilled over now, running down her cheeks. She's not coming, is she? Something bad happened to her. He did something bad. He wanted to lie, wanted to tell her everything would be fine, but he couldn't. She'd had enough lies. I don't know, he said honestly, but I'm going to help you find out, and I'm going to make sure you're safe while we do. How? The word was tiny, desperate. We're going to call the police. No! She stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. No police! He said if we told anyone, if we went to the police, he'd kill her. He said he'd know, that he has friends everywhere, and they'd tell him and he'd... She couldn't finish, her small body shaking with terror. He stood too, hands raised in a calming gesture. Lily, listen to me. I know you're scared, but if your mom is in trouble, the police are the only ones who can help her. This man, whoever he is, he's counting on you being too afraid to tell anyone. That's how people like him win. But what if he finds out? What if he hurts her more because I told? It was a fair question, one he didn't have a good answer for. But staying silent wasn't an option either. What if she's somewhere right now waiting for someone to help her, and no one comes because no one knows? He countered gently. Your mom sent you away to protect you. Now we need to protect her. Lily stood frozen, torn between terror and hope, her hands twisted together so tightly her knuckles were white. He took a slow step toward her. You don't have to do this alone anymore. I'm right here, and I'm not going anywhere. We'll do this together, okay? You, me, and people whose job it is to help kids and families in trouble. You promise? Her voice was so small. You promise you won't leave me alone with them? I promise. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the rain outside and the hum of the refrigerator. Then, slowly, Lily nodded. Okay, she whispered. Okay. He pulled out his phone, his hand steadier than he felt, and dialed. The line rang twice before a dispatcher answered. 911? What's your emergency? He looked at Lily, at this brave, terrified little girl who'd survived 2 days alone on the streets, and chose his words carefully. I need to report a missing person and a child in danger, and I think we're running out of time. The police arrived within 20 minutes. 2 officers in rain-slicked uniforms standing at his door with expressions that managed to be both professional and weary. Officer Chen was younger, maybe 30, with kind eyes behind rain-spotted glasses. Her partner, Officer Rodriguez, was older, grayer,
with the thick shoulders of someone who spent years carrying other people's burdens. Lily had gone rigid the moment she heard the knock, pressing herself into the corner of the couch like she could disappear into the cushions. He sat beside her, close enough to be reassuring but not so close she'd feel trapped. "I'm Officer Chen," the woman said, crouching down to Lily's eye level with practiced ease. "You must be Lily. I heard you had a really scary couple of days." Lily said nothing, just stared. "It's okay if you don't want to talk right now," Chen continued, her voice gentle, "but we need to find your mom, and to do that, we need your help. Can you tell me her name?" A long pause. Then, barely audible. "Sarah. Sarah Mitchell." Rodriguez was already typing into a tablet. "And your address, Lily? Apartment 2B, 847 Riverside." More typing. Rodriguez's expression darkened slightly as something came up on his screen, but he said nothing. "Lily, the man you told—" She glanced at him, realizing she didn't have his name. "David," he supplied quietly. "The man you told David about, the one who's been coming to your house, can you describe him for me?" Lily's hand found the backpack beside her, clutching it like a lifeline. "He's big, tall, he has dark hair, kind of long, and there's a tattoo on his neck like a snake or something. Black ink." Rodriguez and Chen exchanged a look. "Did your mom ever mention his name?" Rodriguez asked. "No, just him." "What about where he came from? How your mom knew him?" Lily shook her head, then stopped. "Wait, once I heard Mom on the phone with someone, maybe her friend Teresa. She said something about the casino and how she never should have gone there, how she was stupid, how now he wouldn't leave her alone." The pieces were starting to form a picture, and David didn't like what he was seeing. A woman in financial trouble, desperate enough to gamble, a loan shark or enforcer who came calling when she couldn't pay, a child caught in the middle. "Lily," Chen said carefully, "when you went back to your apartment yesterday and saw the blood, did you touch anything, move anything?" "No, I was too scared. I just ran." "Good. That's good." She looked at Rodriguez. "We need to get a unit over to Riverside now. Check the apartment, canvass the neighbors." Rodriguez nodded, already speaking quietly into his radio. Chen turned back to Lily. "We're going to do everything we can to find your mom, but right now, we need to make sure you're somewhere safe. David here." She looked at him with a question in her eyes.
"I can keep her tonight," he said immediately. "I've got a spare room. My son's here too, but he's 7. He's good with other kids." "Mr. David," Chen interrupted gently, "that's very kind, but we have protocols. Lily needs to be placed with Child Protective Services until we locate her mother or another family member." "No," Lily's voice cut through the room like a blade. "No, I want to stay here. He promised. He promised he wouldn't leave me." The desperation in her voice hit him square in the chest. Chen looked at him, sympathy written across her face. "Lily, sweetie, I know you feel safe here, but you don't understand." Lily was crying now, full sobs shaking her small frame. "Everyone leaves. Everyone always leaves. My dad left when I was a baby, and Mom tried so hard, but now she's gone too. And if I go with you, I'll end up somewhere with strangers who don't care, and no one will look for Mom, and she'll—" She couldn't finish, breaking down completely. David felt something crack inside him. He'd been trying to keep his distance, to be helpful but not attached, but looking at this little girl who'd been abandoned by circumstances and failed by every system that should have protected her, he couldn't. He just couldn't. "What if I vouched for him?" he heard himself say. "I'm sorry. What if I vouched for him staying here, just for tonight? You can do a background check on me. I'm clean. I have a steady job. My son is healthy and happy. My neighbor downstairs used to be a social worker. She can vouch for me too. Just give her one night of feeling safe before she has to go through the system." Rodriguez had finished his radio call and was studying David with an unreadable expression. "You understand what you're offering. If we allow this, you're responsible for her well-being. And if anything happens, nothing will happen. I have a daughter. Had a daughter." The words came out before he could stop them. "She was 9. Car accident. 3 years ago. She and my wife both." He swallowed hard. The pain's still sharp, even after all this time. "My son was in the car too, but he survived. So I know what it's like to be a kid whose world just ended. And I know what difference it makes when someone shows up and stays." The room went quiet. Even Lily had stopped crying, staring at him with those enormous eyes. Chen and Rodriguez looked at each other, having some silent conversation in the way only longtime partners could. Finally, Chen sighed. "We can give you tonight, but I'm calling child services first thing in the morning, and someone will be here by 10 a.m. to check on the situation. We'll also need to do a formal interview with Lily, get her statement on record." "Understood." "And David," Rodriguez's voice was firm, "we're going to find Sarah Mitchell, but you need to understand, given the blood at the scene, the circumstances, the timeline, we're treating this as a potential homicide investigation. which means you need to prepare Lily for the possibility that we might not find her mother alive." The words hung in the air like stones. Lily made a small wounded sound. David pulled her against his side, and for the first time since the bus stop, she let him, pressing her face against his shoulder and sobbing. "We'll do our best," Chen said quietly, standing. She pulled out a card and handed it to him. "My direct number. If she remembers anything else, anything at all, call me immediately. And David, thank you for stopping. A lot of people wouldn't have." After they left, the apartment felt too quiet again. Lily had cried herself to exhaustion, her body slack against him, her breathing gradually evening out. He thought she might have fallen asleep, but then she spoke, her voice muffled against his shirt. "Your daughter, what was her name?" "Emma." "Was she nice?" A painful smile tugged at his mouth. "She was bossy and stubborn and made up songs about everything. She once convinced her brother that clouds were made of marshmallows, and he believed her for an entire year. She sounds nice." She was. Silence again, but different this time. Softer. "David?" "Yeah?" "If they find my mom, if she's—" She couldn't say the word. "What happens to me?" It was the question he'd been dreading, the one he didn't have a good answer for. "We'll figure it out. One step at a time. But whatever happens, you won't be alone. I promise you that." She nodded against his shoulder, and he felt her finally relax, the fear draining out of her in degrees. A door opened down the hall, his son, woken by the voices or maybe just by that sixth sense kids had. He appeared in the doorway in his dinosaur pajamas, rubbing his eyes. "Dad, who's that?" He looked at the little girl in his arms, then at his son, and felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. "This is Lily. She's going to stay with us for a little while. She's had a really hard time, so we're going to help her, okay?" His son studied Lily with the solemn attention only a 7-year-old could muster, then he nodded decisively. "Okay. Does she like pancakes? Because you make really good pancakes." Despite everything, David felt himself smile. "I don't know. We'll have to ask her in the morning." His son nodded again and shuffled back to bed. The apartment settled once more. "Lily," David said softly, "let's get you settled in the spare room. You need real sleep." She let him guide her down the hall, let him show her where everything was, let him tuck the 2 big blankets around her small frame. As he turned to leave, her voice stopped him. "David, do you think she's still alive? My mom?" He wanted to lie, wanted to give her hope, but she'd had enough lies. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I think she fought like hell to protect you, and I think she'd want you to be brave now, no matter what we find." Lily nodded, her eyes already closing with exhaustion. He left the door cracked open, a nightlight glowing in the hall, and went to his own room. But sleep didn't come. Instead, he lay awake thinking about a woman desperate enough to send her child into the rain alone, about a little girl who'd survived 2 days on the streets, about a man with a snake tattoo and mean voice who might have already taken a mother away from her daughter.
And he thought about Officer Rodriguez's words. Potential homicide investigation. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Officer Chen. "Units at Riverside Drive. Apartment shows signs of struggle. Blood spatter indicates likely injury. No body. Canvassing building now. One neighbor reports seeing a large man with neck tattoo leaving building 2 nights ago, around 2 a.m. Man was alone. Sarah Mitchell's whereabouts still unknown." He stared at the screen, his heart sinking. Alone. The man had left alone, which meant either Sarah had gotten away somehow, or he'd taken her body somewhere else. David looked down the hall toward the room where Lily was sleeping. This brave little girl who'd been through hell and was still holding on to hope. "Please," he thought, to whoever might be listening, "please let us find her alive." David lost his own daughter 3 years ago. Now he's fighting to save someone else's child. Do you think our past pain makes us stronger, or does it just give us more to lose? Share your thoughts below. Morning came too quickly and brought Officer Chen with it, along with a woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Patricia from Child Protective Services. David had made pancakes as promised, and Lily had eaten 3 of them, while his son chattered about his favorite cartoons, oblivious to the heaviness hanging over the adults in the room. The interview was conducted in the living room, Patricia's voice gentle but probing as she asked Lily to repeat her story, to remember details, to describe the apartment, the man, the timeline of her mother's disappearance. Lily answered everything, her voice small but steady, and David stayed beside her the entire time, exactly as he promised. Chen had news, and it wasn't good. "We've been investigating through the night," she said once the interview concluded, and Lily had gone to play with his son in the next room. Sarah Mitchell worked 2 jobs, waitress at a diner-bound town and night cleaning at an office building. According to her coworkers, she'd been stressed lately, taking a lot of phone calls that upset her. One coworker mentioned seeing a man following Sarah to her car about a week ago. Description matches what Lily told us. What about the apartment? Forensics is still processing, but preliminary analysis suggests the blood is consistent with a head wound. Not necessarily fatal, but serious. We also found evidence of forced entry on the bedroom window, though it's unclear if someone broke in or if Sarah broke out. Chen paused. We ran the description of the man with the snake tattoo through our system. Got a hit. David leaned forward. Who is he? Vincent Kozlov. He works as an enforcer for a local gambling operation run out of the back of the Golden Palace Casino. He has priors: assault, extortion, witness intimidation. Nothing we've been able to make stick, but the pattern is clear. People who owe money to his bosses and can't pay start having accidents. Patricia's expression darkened. And Sarah Mitchell owed them money. We pulled her financials. 3 months ago, she took out what looks like a high-interest loan from a company that's a known front for the gambling ring. $12,000. The repayment terms are predatory, designed to trap people in debt. She'd only managed to pay back $2,000. David felt his stomach turn. So they sent Kozlov to collect. That's our theory. But here's where it gets interesting. Chen pulled out her tablet, showing them surveillance footage. This is from a gas station about 15 miles outside the city, taken at 4:47 a.m. 2 nights ago, the same night Sarah sent Lily away. The footage was grainy but clear enough to see details. A dark sedan pulled up to the pump. A large man got out. Even in the poor light, I could see the tattoo on his neck. Snake. Kozlov. But Chen swiped to the next frame, and David's breath caught. There was someone in the back seat. Small, hunched over. The footage quality made it hard to see details, but the silhouette was unmistakably female. Is that... We think it's Sarah, Chen confirmed. She's alive, or at least she was 2 days ago. Kozlov stopped for gas, paid cash, and drove north. We've been tracking his route through traffic cameras. He took her to a property about 30 miles out, an old warehouse the gambling ring uses for storage. Hope surged through David's chest, followed immediately by dread. You think she's still there? We're organizing a raid right now. SWAT team, hostage negotiators, the works. But David, Chen's expression was grave, you need to understand that even if she's still alive, 2 days is a long time. And men like Kozlov don't usually keep people alive unless they want something. What could he possibly want? She doesn't have the money. Leverage, maybe. Information. Or maybe he's just sending a message to other people who owe his bosses. Either way, we move in within the hour. Patricia cleared her throat. And what happens to Lily during all this? She stays here, David said immediately. She's safe, she's stable, and when we find her mother, she's going to need Lily nearby. Patricia studied him with the assessing gaze of someone who'd seen too many well-meaning people fail vulnerable children. Mr. David, you seem like a genuinely good man, but you understand this is temporary. Even if we recover Sarah Mitchell alive, there will be investigations, evaluations. Lily may not be able to return to her mother's care immediately, if at all. I understand, but she needs to know someone's in her corner. She needs to know she matters. Something softened in Patricia's expression. All right, for now we'll maintain the current arrangement, but I'll need to conduct home visits and you'll need to undergo a formal background check for emergency foster placement. Whatever it takes. Chen stood, holstering her tablet. I need to get to the staging area. David, keep your phone on. The moment we have news, good or bad, I'll call. After they left, David found Lily sitting on the floor of his son's room watching him build an elaborate castle out of blocks. He looked up when he entered and he could see the question in his eyes.
They found something, he said, sitting down beside her. They think they know where your mom is. Lily's entire body went rigid. Is she alive? They don't know yet, but they're going to find out. Right now, there are police officers on their way to bring her home. Can I come? Can I go with them? No, sweetheart. It's not safe. These are specially trained officers, and they need to focus on getting your mom out without anyone getting hurt. The best thing you can do is wait here with me and be ready for when she comes back. What if she doesn't come back? His son had stopped building, listening with that intense way children did when they sensed something important was happening. Then we'll figure out what comes next, David said honestly. But Lily, whatever happens, you're not going to face it alone. Do you understand? You're not alone anymore. She nodded, but he could see the fear still churning behind her eyes, the terror of hoping for something and having it ripped away. The next 2 hours were the longest of David's life. He tried to keep the kids distracted with games and cartoons, made lunch that nobody ate, checked his phone every 30 seconds, even though he knew Chen would call the moment she had news. Finally, at 2:17 p.m., his phone rang. He stepped into the kitchen, out of earshot. Chen? We got her. The relief in Chen's voice was palpable. Sarah Mitchell is alive. Injured, dehydrated, traumatized as hell, but alive. We're transporting her to County General now. David closed his eyes, feeling tears prick behind his eyelids. Thank God. What about Kozlov? In custody. Didn't go quietly, but no shots fired.
We found Sarah locked in a storage room in the back of the warehouse. He'd been keeping her there, trying to force her to sign over her apartment lease and custody of Lily as payment for the debt. She refused. She refused? David's voice cracked. For 2 days she was held captive and she refused? She's a fighter. Told us the only reason she was still alive was because she convinced Kozlov that if anything happened to her, her daughter knew where to find evidence she had hidden. Bank statements, recordings, the works. She bluffed him into keeping her alive long enough for us to find her. Does Lily know? Can she see her? That's why I'm calling. Hospital wants to keep Sarah for observation, run some tests, treat her injuries, but she's asking for Lily. I can have a unit pick you both up and bring you to the hospital if... We'll be ready in 5 minutes. He hung up and turned to find Lily standing in the doorway, his son right behind her. Her face was pale, her hands trembling. My mom? David dropped to one knee, bringing himself to her eye level. She's alive, Lily. The police found her. She's at the hospital right now, and she's asking for you. For a moment, Lily didn't move, didn't breathe. Then she launched herself at him, wrapping her small arms around his neck and sobbing, but this time the sobs were different. Relief. Joy. Grief for what might have been mixed with gratitude for what was. She's alive, Lily kept repeating, like a prayer. She's really alive. She's alive because of you, David said, holding her tight, because you were brave enough to survive, brave enough to tell your story, brave enough to trust someone. Your mom fought for you, and you fought for her, and now you get to be together again. The drive to the hospital felt endless and too short. Lily sat in the back seat, practically vibrating with nervous energy, asking questions David couldn't always answer. Would her mom be okay? Would they have to go back to that apartment? What about the man with the snake tattoo? One thing at a time, he kept saying. First you see your mom. Everything else we'll figure out. County General's emergency wing was a maze of white walls and antiseptic smell, but Officer Chen was waiting at the entrance to guide them through. She led them to a private room at the end of a quiet hallway. She's weak, Chen warned quietly before opening the door, and she looks worse than she is. Bruises, cuts, dehydration, but she's gonna be okay. David felt Lily's hand tighten around his. He squeezed back. Ready? She nodded. Chen opened the door. Sarah Mitchell was propped up in the hospital bed, ivy lines running into her arm, a bandage wrapped around her head, bruises blooming across her face and arms. She looked fragile, broken, like a strong wind might scatter her into pieces. But when she saw Lily, her entire face transformed. Baby! Lily didn't walk. She ran, launching herself at the bed with a cry that was pure anguish and joy combined. Sarah caught her, wincing at the impact but not letting go, wrapping her daughter in her arms and rocking her, both of them crying too hard to speak. David stood in the doorway, his own vision blurring. Chen beside him wiped her eyes, not even trying to hide it. Mama, I thought you killed me. There was blood and the apartment was destroyed and you didn't come to the bus stop and I waited so long. I know, baby. I know. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Sarah's voice was hoarse, wrecked. I had to get you somewhere safe. He was coming and I couldn't let him hurt you. But he hurt you instead. I don't care. You're safe. That's all that matters. You're safe. Sarah looked up then, her eyes finding David's across the room. You're the one who found her. He stepped into the room, suddenly feeling like an intruder on this intimate moment. I just happened to drive by the right bus stop. Officer Chen told me what you did, that you took her in, kept her safe, staying with her. You didn't have to do that. Most people wouldn't. I couldn't leave her there. You saved my daughter's life. Tears streamed down Sarah's face. How do I ever thank you for that? You don't have to thank me. You just focus on getting better, on rebuilding your life, both of you. Sarah looked down at Lily, smoothing her hair back with a gentleness that made David's chest ache. We're going to be okay now, aren't we, baby? No more running, no more hiding, just you and me figuring it out together. Lily nodded against her mother's chest, and for the first time since David had found her at that bus stop, she looked like what she was, a child. Not a survivor, not a victim, just a little girl who'd found her way back to her mother's arms.
3 weeks later, David found himself back at County General, but this time the visit was planned. Sarah was being discharged, finally cleared by the doctors who'd monitored her recovery from the concussion, dehydration, and various injuries Kozlov had inflicted during her captivity. He'd visited several times over those weeks, bringing Lily to see her mother, staying while they talked, then taking Lily back to his apartment where she'd been staying under temporary emergency foster care. Patricia from CPS had been skeptical at first, but after multiple home visits and seeing how well Lily was adjusting, how his son had taken to her like the sister sister he'd lost, she'd approved the arrangement. Sarah had spent those weeks not just healing physically but building a legal case. With Officer Chen's help, she'd provided testimony that led to charges against not just Kozlov, but 3 other members of the gambling ring. The predatory loan company that had trapped her in debt was under investigation, and most importantly, she'd qualified for emergency housing assistance and victim support services. Now, standing in the hospital lobby waiting for the discharge paperwork to finalize, David watched Lily practically bounce on her toes with excitement. "Easy," he said with a smile. "Your mom's still recovering. No tackle hugs like last time." "I'll be gentle," Lily promised, but her eyes were bright with joy that hadn't dimmed in 3 weeks. His son tugged on his sleeve. "Dad, when Lily goes home with her mom, can she still come visit? She promised to teach me how to draw rabbits." David's heart squeezed. He'd been dreading this conversation, the one where he'd have to explain that sometimes people came into your life briefly, made an impact, and then moved on. But before he could answer, Sarah appeared in a wheelchair pushed by a nurse, Lily's backpack, now carefully repaired, sitting on her lap. Lily ran to her, remembering at the last second to slow down and hug her mother carefully. Sarah laughed, the sound still rough but genuine, and pulled her daughter close. "Ready to go home, baby?" "Where is home?" Lily asked, a flicker of the old fear crossing her face. "Remember I told you? We got a new apartment, smaller than the old one, but it's on the 3rd floor and it has a deadbolt and a security door and—" Sarah's voice caught. "And that man will never find us there. He's going to be in prison for a very long time." The nurse wheeled Sarah to the exit where David's car was waiting. He'd already installed a booster seat he'd borrowed from his neighbor downstairs, knowing Sarah didn't have a car of her own anymore. Kozlov had stripped her of everything, including her beat-up sedan that had been sold for parts. Getting Sarah settled in the passenger seat was an awkward process, her body still stiff and sore, but she waved off his help with a stubborn independence he recognized. She'd survived 2 days of hell through sheer willpower. She wasn't about to let a few lingering injuries slow her down now. The new apartment was in a better neighborhood than the old one, part of a subsidized housing program for domestic violence survivors. It was modest, a 1-bedroom with a pull-out couch in the living room, but the windows had locks, the building had security cameras, and most importantly, nobody there knew where to find them. David helped carry up the bags of donations that had been collected, clothes, kitchen supplies, toys for Lily, all provided by a local charity. His son helped too, importantly carrying a box of books like it contained precious treasure. Inside, the apartment was sparse but clean. Sarah had already been here once, the day before, to set up the basics. Now she stood in the center of the living room, Lily's hand in hers, looking around with an expression caught between grief for what they'd lost and hope for what they might build. "It's not much," she said quietly. "It's safe," David replied. "That's worth more than anything else." Sarah's eyes met his, and he saw the weight of gratitude and guilt battling there. "David, I can never repay you for what you've done. Taking Lily in, keeping her safe, visiting us, helping us move. You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything. My daughter could have ended up in the system, bouncing between foster homes, traumatized and alone. Instead, she spent 3 weeks in a home where someone actually cared about her, where she had a friend." She glanced at his son, who was showing Lily where they'd set up her books on a small shelf. "Where she got to feel like a kid again." David felt his throat tighten. "She gave me something too. After Emma, after I lost my daughter, I shut down a lot of the parts of me that hurt too much to feel. Taking care of Lily, it reminded me that the hurt means something, that love is worth the risk of loss." Sarah wiped her eyes, laughing shakily. "We're a mess, aren't we? Both of us trying to piece our lives back together." "Yeah, but maybe that's okay. Maybe we're allowed to be messy for a while." A comfortable silence settled over them, broken only by the sound of the kids giggling over something in the next room. "What happens now?" David asked. "With work, with childcare, with everything?" Sarah sighed. "It's going to be hard. The diner gave me my job back, and Victim Services is helping with counseling for both me and Lily. There's a free after-school program at the community center down the street, and I'm working with a financial counselor to rebuild my credit to make sure I never end up in that situation again." "What about Kozlov, the trial?" She says, "The prosecutor says it's a strong case. Between my testimony, the evidence they found at the warehouse, and the other victims who've come forward, he's looking at 15 to 20 years minimum." Her jaw tightened. "It's not enough. It'll never be enough for what he put us through, but it's something." David nodded. He'd been following the case through Officer Chen, who had become something of a friend over the past weeks. The gambling ring was being dismantled piece by piece, and Kozlov's arrest had created a domino effect. Other victims were coming forward. Other families were getting justice. Sometimes, one person stopping at one bus stop really could change everything. "Listen," he said, pulling out a piece of paper from his pocket. "I know you have Victim Services helping you, but I wanted you to have this too. It's the number from my neighbor downstairs, the one who used to be a social worker. She knows resources, knows people who can help with things like rent assistance, job training, whatever you need. And this," he wrote another number below it, "this is mine.
If you or Lily ever need anything, and I mean anything, you call, day or night.
Sarah took the paper with trembling hands. David? I mean it. You're not alone in this. Not anymore. She folded the paper carefully and tucked it into her pocket like a talisman. You know what the hardest part was? When I was locked in that room, not knowing if I'd ever see Lily again, what kept me going was imagining that someone had found her. Someone kind. Someone who wouldn't just call the cops and wash their hands of it, but who'd actually stay and help. She looked at him with bright eyes. I imagined you, even though I didn't know you existed. And somehow, impossibly, you were real. David didn't trust himself to speak, so he just nodded. Lily appeared in the doorway then, her face serious. Mom? Can David and his son come visit sometimes, like maybe for dinner or something? Sarah looked at David with a question in her expression. She could see her weighing it, the desire to maintain independence against the practical reality that they could both use friends who understood what they'd been through. I make really good spaghetti, his son announced helpfully. And Lily said she'd teach me to draw rabbits, so we need to do that. Sarah laughed, the sound getting stronger every time David heard it. I think that sounds wonderful. Maybe next week? I should be steadier on my feet by then. Next week, David agreed. They stayed for another hour, helping Sarah unpack, making sure everything was set up properly, watching the kids play with an ease that seemed impossible given everything they'd all been through. But maybe that was the thing about resilience. It didn't mean you weren't broken. It meant you learned to build something new from the pieces. As they were leaving, Lily caught David's hand. Thank you, she said simply. For stopping. For staying. He crouched down, meeting her eyes, those same enormous eyes that had stared at him in the rain at a bus stop that felt like a lifetime ago. Thank you for being brave enough to accept help. A lot of people can't do that. She hugged him then, quick and fierce, before running back to her mother. In the car on the way home, his son was quiet for a long time before speaking. Dad, do you think Emma would have liked Lily? David's hands tightened on the steering wheel, emotion flooding through him. Yeah, buddy, I think they would have been great friends. Good, because I think Lily is kind of like a sister now. Not instead of Emma, just also. Yeah, also. That night, after his son was asleep, David stood at his window looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, a little girl was sleeping in a safe bed next to her mother for the first time in weeks. Somewhere out there, a woman was rebuilding a life that had been shattered by violence and greed. Somewhere out there, other children were waiting at other bus stops, hoping someone would stop. He couldn't save them all, he knew that. But he'd saved one. And sometimes, one was enough to change everything. His phone buzzed with a text. Sarah's number, saved now in his contacts. Lily wanted me to send you this. A photo loaded, a drawing in crayon, a stick figure man standing in the rain next to a stick figure girl. Above them in Lily's careful handwriting, my hero. Below it in Sarah's handwriting, ours. David saved the photo, his eyes blurring, and typed back a simple response. You saved yourselves. I just drove the car. But even as he sent it, he knew it wasn't entirely true. They'd saved each other. Him and Lily and Sarah, all of them broken in different ways, all of them learning that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was let someone else help carry the weight. 3 weeks ago, he had been driving home with groceries, thinking about nothing more important than whether he'd remembered to buy milk. Now he had a little girl who called him a hero, a woman who trusted him with her daughter's safety, and a reminder that the smallest choices, stopping at a bus stop, offering a jacket, making a promise and keeping it, could ripple outward in ways you'd never imagine. He thought about Emma, about the daughter he'd lost and the hole she'd left in his heart. That hole was still there. It always would be. But maybe, just maybe, learning to love again, in whatever form that took, wasn't betraying her memory. Maybe it was honoring it. His son's voice drifted from the bedroom, talking in his sleep about rabbits and pancakes and teaching Lily to ride a bike. David smiled, turned off the light, and went to check on him. Tomorrow he'd go to work. He'd pick up his son from school. He'd live his life one ordinary day at a time. But now he'd do it knowing that ordinary days could hold extraordinary moments, that stopping for one person could save 2 lives, that heroes didn't wear capes. They just showed up and stayed when everything in them wanted to drive away. And that sometimes, the family you chose was just as powerful as the family you were born into. Maybe more. 6 months later, David received a graduation notice in the mail. Lily had finished 2nd grade, something that shouldn't have been possible given the trauma she'd endured, but with therapy, support, and her mother's unwavering presence, she'd not only caught up, but thrived. The ceremony was held in the elementary school gymnasium, filled with proud parents and restless children. David and his son sat in the 3rd row next to Sarah, who looked healthier than I'd ever seen her, still thin, still carrying the weight of what she'd survived.
but standing taller, when Lily's name was called, and she walked across the stage to receive her certificate, she spotted them in the crowd and waved so enthusiastically she nearly dropped her diploma.
After the ceremony, they all went out for ice cream, a tradition that had developed over the past months of regular dinners, weekend park visits, and slow, steady healing. Mom got promoted at the diner, Lily announced proudly, chocolate ice cream dotting her chin. She's a shift manager now. That's amazing, David said, genuinely impressed. Sarah shrugged, but he could see the pride in her eyes. It's not much, but it's enough. We're making it work. More than making it work, he corrected, you're building something real. She met his eyes and something passed between them, an understanding of what they'd survived, what they'd built, what might still be possible. His son and Lily were already planning their next adventure, something involving bikes and a creek they'd discovered at the park. David watched them, these two kids who'd found friendship in the aftermath of tragedy, and felt something settle in his chest. Not closure, he'd never have that with Emma, but peace. The kind that came from knowing that love didn't end when someone left, it just changed form. Thank you, Sarah said quietly, for not driving past that bus stop. David smiled. Thank you for teaching your daughter to be brave enough to ask for help. We saved each other, didn't we? Yeah, he agreed, we did. And as they sat there in the ice cream shop, two broken families learning to become something new together, David thought about all the people who'd driven past that bus stop before him. All the ones who'd seen a little girl alone in the rain and decided it wasn't their problem. He was grateful, so grateful that he'd been the one to stop. Because sometimes the most ordinary moment of your life, a rainy Tuesday, a drive home from groceries, a glimpse of a child at a bus stop, could become the moment that changed everything. All you had to do was stop. All you had to do was stay. All you had to do was care. Every day we pass people who are hurting, struggling, or waiting for someone to notice them. Lily was waiting at a bus stop. Who might be waiting in your life for someone to simply stop and care? Sometimes being a hero is as simple as paying attention. What's one small act of kindness you could do today that might change someone's world? Share your story below. Let's inspire each other to be the person who stops.